Let's dive quite a bit deeper into making sense of how we're going to process through all this data in our HTML documents. The first thing I want us to see is what happens if we just try to print out the entirety of this document directly. So I'm going to press run, and we're going to see a huge amount of information filling up our screen. And I'd like you to do this on your own and just to really see what it is that's popping up. In summary, it's all of the HTML information that makes up a web page. And so we can see lots of different types of HTML things, dividers, and we can see some, well, there's some JavaScript content in here. I can see some tags. I can see some different types of information, IDs, classes, some stuff that we learned about in the intro to HTML in this section. Now, there's a bunch of things that we might be able to use to help us make our way through this mess of information a little bit more confidently. And actually, by the end of this tutorial, you're going to be able to do so extremely precisely. JSoup is a very helpful tool for doing this. So one thing that we don't want to have is just this printed out all right off the bat so that we have our screen full of stuff. And so we want to think about 4 ways that we can actually kind of zoom in a little more closely and dig deep into this information a little bit more precisely. So content we can get, there's a couple general categories. We can get tags. These are the things just inside of these kind of triangular brackets, like P for paragraph or LI for list. So tags are they're kind of more generic in general. They're useful at a deeper level, but we don't want to start with them because there's so many of them that will be present potentially in an HTML document. It's not going to get us zoomed in enough. But we'll see an example of this soon. Then we have attributes, which are special words that customize tags like hide or color or center. These are not very helpful at the moment. It is possible you can actually organize information by attributes, but we're not going to really do that in this section. It's pretty specialized. The more specific ones that we will be accessing and using quite a bit more often are classes and IDs. Classes are used to organize content into major sections. Looks like this. There's a tag, and then it actually says class equals and then some class name. Major sections will be organized very particularly with these that we could use to zoom in very intensely immediately. And then we have IDs, which are unique labels for sections of the HTML document. Looks like this, the tag name and then ID equals the ID name. Since these are unique in the document, this is the only time that we're able to return a single result. We'll see more about this soon. Everything else is to return a list of data or like a whole number of different elements, but this can return a single element if we want it to because IDs are unique in the content that we're looking at here. So where should we begin? Well, we kind of have to begin by looking at the website itself. And in this section, we're going to be looking at the Surrey Schools home page. And what we're going to really try to do is to be able to get our web scraper to pull live web data from the updated news, because this is something that's going to change from time to time, and maybe we want to be diligent students and keep up to date on the newest information from our school. So we want to create a program that can actually just do the work for us and extract these highlights of news information so that we can, well, just have that information in our program or in our own database or to be used however we want in an automated way. So we need to try to figure out how to work with the contents of this page. So by pressing F12, we can see that there's just a whole bunch of content. And up here, this body class is like, it highlights the entire page. So kind of everything is buried under this section. And it looks like we have some functionality in the script here. And down here, I have this form. And if I expand this, I have some other information. As I kind of highlight things, I can see the things I influence. See that top bar. And now I have this whole workspace down the middle. So let's zoom in here a little bit more. And I see in here that this body container has the main section of this content row. So look how many layers deep we can get. There's a lot of stuff to weed through to really get down to this specific news subsection. There's got to be a better way, and there is. By right-clicking on a section of content and clicking on Inspect, I'll be led directly to the line of HTML that references or that builds this in the outermost layer. So I can see here that this span is for the news. And if I move my mouse up a little bit here, I see that it's contained in this kind of section, this header section. And this is a part of a larger class that has this long name here that kind of contains this entire chunk of information. And down here within it, I have this subsection that inside of has more subsections that allow me to kind of zoom in closer and closer until I can finally see these kind of individual pieces of news updates. So I finally, just by doing some kind of exploration, located some interesting information that we're going to use soon to be able to work with. So hold on to that thought for now. Maybe do some exploring yourself. But first, I want to show you a couple of things to work with a couple of our first scenarios here. So let's see an example of get some content by tag. How might we do this? We've already gathered the entire document. It's called doc. Our JSoup has given us basically a massive bowl of soup. This document contains everything in this big, messy, massive pot of stew with a million ingredients. And we want to be able to have our expert tasting, how do you say this? That's not even really awkward. To let your palate pick out different tastes and figure out what ingredients make this thing up a little bit more precisely. So let's dive in. We're going to use our tasting tag here in this terrible metaphor. And what we're looking for is something called elements. And you might need to import this still. I've imported it already. Element and elements are two imports you'll have to do throughout this section, but elements will store a number of different subsections of the HTML. I'm going to call this one paragraphs, because in this case, I'm letting the document get elements by tag. And this tag I'm going to look for is the p tag, a pretty common page in some HTML documents that has paragraphs of information. And what this is going to do is it's going to look through the document, and every time it finds a tag of p, it's going to store all that sub information in an element entry. And now I have a big kind of array list of all these things. And so what I can do is iterate over them. The elements type has a bunch of single elements in it. I'm going to call this element E, and I'm going to iterate over all of my paragraphs content. So I'm going to pull out each element one at a time from all the paragraphs that I found, and I'm just going to see what information is printed out. Oh, I did E for these. What information gets printed out from this. And when I run this, I see that it has only 3, actually. This website actually has very few paragraphs. The first one is a translation tool summary. The second one is some information about entering a search bar, it looks like. And finally, looks like some kind of a link to learn more about things that's being spanned across a certain section. It does also include, you'll notice here, the actual tag information. One thing I can also do on these sub elements is actually just type in text, and it will only show the text information inside of that. So I've boiled down some of my information on this website to single individual lines of text. I've already been able to prune away tons of stuff and just hone right in on a particular tag. What if I was to look at a different type of tag, like an LI tag for a line, and I see here that I have a whole bunch of these independently organized lines, or list entries actually, if I think back to my HTML, and I can see that these are all the different things that are list type information on this website. Okay, kind of cool. I notice actually from my familiarity with this, from looking at it for a while, that this news, these 3 entries, International Women's Day entry, if I go back over here, is actually showing up as one of the entries, March 8th, 2021, March 8th, 2021. So I've been able to actually find this information that I'm looking for. I want these 3 things. And I've managed to find them by searching for elements by tag. So I've already pruned down to some specific things. But it's kind of still muddled in a big mess of other list type things. So there's got to be a better way. I've done better here, but I'm not quite zoomed in enough yet. But there you go. I would recommend typing this in and just kind of trying this out to get content by tag. You can always rewind it if you want to see it, but we're going to move on to our next one. Something else here that I can, just for fun, I'll show you. We can actually get all the links in the file. Let's actually just kind of cut and paste this back here because I have enough information really here. I want to just get the links in this case, and I'm just going to call, well, E is enough for these links here. And yeah, I think this is good. It should be able to find us all the links, which are things that have this A tag in front of them. So we see I have these links to like some social media stuff, and I have replies and a link to the calendar. So there's these are a quick list, really, of all the various links in the program. However, I don't exactly know where these links kind of take us. So what if I wanted to extract from a website all of the links that are inside of it? Well, what I could do is I'm going to just make another line that gets printed out here, and this element that I'm accessing, I'm actually able to pull out a sub attribute, something that is an even more zoomed in detail of this individual element. And for a link, this is something called an href. You're not going to actually need to do this for your project, but just for curiosity and some depth of understanding, I'm going to show you that we can chain some things together. And now if I print out this href, what I'll see is that below each of the descriptions of the links, I actually see the link itself. Some of them are just links on the website to other pages, and other ones are actually to external URLs. And so maybe you have some desire to actually pull links from web pages. Here's a bit of a starting point for how you can get that information extracted. Okay, that's tag information. How about we use a different type of search? We're not going to use attributes, as I said before. Let's focus on one that's a little more precise. Let's get some elements. And in fact, we're going to get a single element here by ID, because IDs are unique. So in this case, I'm going to just import the element singular immediately. I'll just reference that. I'm going to call this my content, and in my doc, I'm going to get element by ID. But I need to think about what type of ID I want to use to search for. And so if I head back over to my web page here, I know that I'm in this section of code here. One thing that I could do is look for an ID like this to zoom right into this section immediately. By double clicking on this section of the document, you'll notice that Chrome highlights this immediately for me. It's kind of on to what I want to do here. And I'm able to paste this in as the string for the ID that I want to find. And now what I've actually been able to find is this content, which I'll print out, and we'll see what's contained inside of it. I have, well, this ID that I found and searched for, and inside of it I have this class and the 3 different listed pieces of information that I've now been able to kind of unlock and break down a little bit more closely to and zoom in on through this process here. So I'm narrowing in on the hunt. I'm chasing down my prey and trying to get it a little bit more organized. So I've been able to get that chunk of information now stored in this content element. I printed it out to see that it's there, but I can do a little bit better. I'm going to actually, and I'm totally allowed to chain these things together. Elements are able to reference other elements in the way that this has been built. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to get some of this, the text I'm looking for here, from my content, not from the doc anymore. I want to zoom specifically in on my content. I'm going to go content. I want to get elements by tag inside of my content. And something I saw before is that I actually have some of these A tag subcomponents. Let's just see it one more time. When I print out the content, not print, writing in Python again accidentally, content, I want to see that I have these A tags attached to each one of these different entries I'm trying to extract the data on. So if I get these elements by tag A, I can just simply write another iteration. I'm going to say E from my text. I'm going to iterate over this. And inside of this, I'm going to print out my, well, let's just see the link initially. So I'm going to comment out this. And let's just see the links, the references. I've now narrowed into just these sections. And what if a decryptor just came open here. Back to here. Okay. Let's print out just the text inside of this and see what it says instead. And look at this. I've now been able to zoom right into just the information about Women's Day, the scholarships, and the travel. But I still have this extra view all content in here because, well, if I look over here, I have this information kind of buried in the bottom here somewhere. I don't even see where it is. Let's view all. Let's view this, inspect it down here. This href that's a part of this ID buried under this ID section. See how it's in there? So what if I wanted to avoid this altogether? Is there a way that I can zoom in even more? And yes, there is. It's because this view all isn't a part of the most specific organized section here, this class. And here's where I can use this class. I'm going to copy the content of it in this final query over here. So we got this interesting element by ID stuff. You can refer back to it by rewinding if you need to. I'm going to erase it, and instead we're going to get our elements by class. Here's another option. ID and class are kind of interchangeably useful to be able to zoom in really well. But let's dive in here and pull out my elements. I'm going to call this content. And in my doc, my whole doc, I'm going to get elements by class. And the class, I've already copied and pasted that class information is the HCF rollup, HCF news rollup. Sometimes these classes will appear in more than one spot, so you might have multiple options. In this case, I know there's only one. Some trial and error might be necessary to kind of figure that out. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to print out the content and see what it is that shows up here. And I indeed only have one showing up that includes this content and none of the extra information. Okay, so let's just see the text and how nicely this kind of curates the information. Okay, so I notice here that it's giving me a single long string of information. Inside the class, it's packaging it up as one single content entry. So I still need to kind of break this down a little bit more and extract out these specific elements. So sometimes in this HTML, it takes some trial and error to really get down to the precise information that you want. But once we get there, we've solved this problem for this website as many times as we want to access it. So it's really going to pay off in the long run to kind of go through this process. And you're going to get quite a bit faster at it as you practice and get some experience. So what I want to do here is I want to get some sub content. So I want to pull out some of the sub information from this long string of information stored in this first element. And the problem is that this elements has the potential to hold multiple things. So if I try to access information inside my contents, I notice I can't actually search for more element content yet. I have to first access an entry in my elements. The easiest way to do this is they actually have a helper method there called first, which is just going to say, if I know there's only one element that I want to access, I'm just going to access the first one directly. And now I have access to this menu that I've grown to love, where I'm able to actually get elements with sub information. And in this case, the information that I wanted was a tag, and it was this li tag. Oops, typo there. Li tag. So I want to pull from the first entry in this content that I snagged. So the first entry is all of this. I want to pull out individually anything that's separated by this li tag, which each of the news updates are. Let me show you one more time. Oops. Let's go back over here. Each of these are separated individually into these li tags. So let's go over here. And now what I should be able to see is if I iterate over the element E inside of my sub content, I should be able to actually print out the elements inside individually on their own line. And here we go. I have these elements now, the three of them individually printed here. And if I get the text on these, I will be able to see that I just have the text information. One last thing I'll show you. What if you want to be extra picky and you're like, oh, this date stuff, I don't really want this showing up. I just want the information. I need to zoom in a little bit further. Well, no worries here. We can just look and analyze to figure out a little bit more about this. We have the tools at hand. Inside each of these li entries, we have the information about the text under the a tag, and then the information about the time under the time tag. So I'm able to pull these out individually from here. So what do? Well, I can just simply do this on one line if I wanted to. Under this element, I can get elements by tag. By tag. And this tag is the A one. And if I access the first entry in that and get the text related to it, now spend some time thinking all this chain through if you're a bit confused, but we'll see what pops out here. It's just the titles that we see for these news updates finally extracted. And I've been able to zoom right on down into the little details to be able to pull this information out. All right, this tutorial has gotten quite long. There's a lot of information in it, but really the main things that you need to come away with this are that we have content we can get. We can get tags that's really useful to kind of zoom in on details, but the real powerful starting point is from the main document to try to look through the website and find classes or IDs that label the specific content we're looking for, and then to be able to snag just that content and then examine the subsections of it to zoom in just a little bit more into the specific content that we want, so that we can extract or scrape from that website the particular subsection of its information that we're interested in scraping. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple more tips on this in videos yet to come, but in the next one after this, I'll talk a bit more about how we can process string information to write the report that you're going to need to do in this section.